The night everything changed came with fireworks and betrayal. At the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, I was standing at our bedroom window, watching neighbors celebrate below, champagne bottles popping like tiny explosions of hope for the coming year. I smiled at the thought of new beginnings. Then came the knock on our door that would shatter my entire world. Outside stood Michael, my husband of 6 years, but his face wasn't soft with love anymore. It was hard, cold, like winter ice that won't thaw no matter how desperately you breathe warmth onto it. In his hands was an envelope, and when he pushed it toward me, my fingers went numb before they even touched the paper. Divorce papers. My cheeks flushed hot beneath my nightgown, an unwanted rush of shame flooding through my body. The smell of stale champagne and cigarette smoke drifted up from the party below, mixing with my rising nausea. Behind me, I heard it crack, the champagne bottle on our dresser, splitting under my trembling grip. Golden liquid pooled across the wood like spilled dreams. "I'm sorry," Michael said, his voice low and empty of feeling. I could only nod. My mouth had gone completely dry, tongue thick and useless. He didn't know yet that my eyes were already filling with tears I refused to let fall. He didn't know that my chest felt like it was caving in, ribs pressing against my lungs until I couldn't breathe. In the terrible silence that stretched between us, broken only by distant laughter from people who still believed in happy endings, I realized with devastating clarity that nothing would ever feel the same again. The papers felt heavy in my hands, official, final, real. This was the man I'd sacrificed everything for. I'd transferred schools to be closer to his job, sold my car to help with our down payment, ended friendships because our schedules didn't align. I wore his favorite perfume on random Tuesdays just to see him smile. I believed in us with every fiber of my being, and he was throwing it all away on New Year's Eve like our love was just another year to be discarded. When the door finally slammed behind him, the sound echoed through our empty house like a gunshot. I sank to the plush bedroom carpet, legs folding beneath me, clutching those papers like they were the only solid thing left in my collapsing universe. Outside, torn confetti swirled past our window, mocking me with fake celebration. I tasted copper on my tongue, tears mixed with shock, and finally, I screamed into the empty night. But here's what Michael didn't know. Here's what he couldn't possibly have imagined as he walked away from our marriage, from our home, from me. I was carrying a secret, one that would change everything, one that would haunt him for the rest of his life. And by the time he found out the truth, it would be far too late to undo what he'd done. If this story grabs you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me. Michael had no idea what was coming. The house was unbearably quiet when I woke up the next morning. For a moment, just one blissful, ignorant moment, I forgot. Then reality crashed back like a wave of ice water. Michael was gone. The divorce papers sat on my nightstand, edges already crumpled from where I'd gripped them too hard. Sunlight filtered through our bedroom blinds, casting stripes across the empty space where he used to sleep. His pillow still held the faint indent of his head, but it was cold now. Everything was cold. I forced myself out of bed, legs shaky beneath me. That's when I saw it. A handwritten note on the kitchen counter, placed carefully beside the coffee maker we'd bought together 3 Christmases ago. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The note was a list, a cold, calculated inventory of everything Michael wanted from our life together. The flat-screen TV, his grandfather's watch that I'd had restored for his birthday, half our savings account, $45,000 that we'd built together, dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. He'd already taken it. The account statement attached to the note showed the withdrawal dated December 30th. He'd planned this. While I was wrapping presents and preparing for our New Year's celebration, he was dismantling our life. Not a single word about me. Not one acknowledgement of us. just a list of possessions. Slam! I threw the coffee mug across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering like my broken heart. The sacrifices I'd made flashed through my mind like a cruel slideshow. I'd sold my beloved Honda Civic to help with the down payment on this house, the house he was now walking away from, leaving me with the full mortgage. I'd transferred from Hamilton Elementary, where I had tenure and respect, to Washington Elementary to be closer to his office. I'd ended friendships because he said we needed couple time. I'd skipped my college reunion because he had a work function. I'd given up pieces of myself one by one because I believed we were building something together. What a fool I'd been. Angela? I turned to find Patricia standing in the doorway, her face etched with worry. She'd let herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago. Honey, I got your text from last night. I came as soon as I could. She found me on the bedroom floor, surrounded by wedding photos I'd pulled from the albums. In each picture, Michael's smile looked like a lie now. Patricia didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, wrapped her arms around my shaking shoulders, and let me cry. From the guest room down the hall, I heard the steady beeping of my father's heart monitor. He'd moved in 3 weeks ago to recover from his surgery, and I'd insisted he stay close to family. Even weak from illness, his voice carried through the house. Angela, he called softly. Come here, sweetheart. I wiped my eyes and walked to his bedside. His weathered hand reached for mine. You always gave so much, Ange, he said, his grip surprisingly strong. To everyone, to your students, to Michael. Now it's time to give that same love to yourself. His eyes held mine, steady and sure. You're stronger than you know, stronger than he ever deserved. Those words wrapped around my broken heart like a shield. 3 days passed in a blur of tears and sleepless nights. Patricia stayed close, bringing coffee at midnight and holding my hand through the worst moments. But I couldn't just sit in my grief. I needed answers. I needed to understand how the man I loved could become someone I didn't recognize. That's when I started going through Michael's things. He'd left in such a hurry that he'd abandoned half his belongings. Old clothes, books, random chargers, tangled in drawers. I wasn't looking for anything specific. Maybe I was just torturing myself, touching pieces of our life that no longer existed. But then I found it, buried under a stack of his old work notebooks in his desk drawer, an old tablet, one he'd used 2 years ago before upgrading. I almost tossed it aside, but something made me press the power button. The battery still had juice. The screen flickered to life, and I realized with a jolt that it was still logged into his messaging apps. Everything was still there, frozen in time, waiting to destroy me. My finger hovered over the message icon. Some part of me knew I shouldn't look. Some part of me understood that once I saw what was there, I could never unsee it. But I needed to know. I tapped the icon. The messages loaded, and my breath stopped in my throat. Jessica was the name at the top of his most recent conversations. I didn't recognize her at first, but as I scrolled through the messages, pieces clicked into place. Jessica Chen, the new hire in Michael's department, the one he'd mentioned casually a few times, always with that careful neutrality that should have been my first warning. The messages went back 8 months. 8 months. My vision blurred as I read through them, each word a fresh knife wound. There were photos, her in his car, her at restaurants I recognized, her in hotel rooms I'd never seen. There were promises, plans for a future that didn't include me. And there were messages that made my blood run cold. Michael, she's so clueless. Honestly, it's almost too easy. Jessica, does she suspect anything? Michael, not a chance. Angela's too busy playing the perfect wife. She gave up everything for me. Easiest mark ever. Her friends, her career advancement, even her car. She made herself completely dependent. Jessica, you're terrible, but I love it. When are you going to tell her? Michael, New Year's. Dramatic timing, right? She'll be devastated, but she'll move on. They always do. I had to set the tablet down. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped it. Rage, pure, white-hot rage, flooded through my veins. He'd mocked me, called me a mark, like I was some kind of con he'd pulled off. He'd laughed about my sacrifices with the woman he was sleeping with behind my back. But I kept reading. I had to see it all. The next messages were worse. Jessica, I have news. Michael. Jessica, I'm pregnant. The date was November 15th, 6 weeks ago. Michael, are you sure? Jessica, positive test this morning. We're having a baby, Michael. This changes everything. I'll file for divorce immediately. We can start our life together. Jessica, finally. I knew you'd do the right thing. So that was it. That was why he'd suddenly filed on New Year's Eve. Not because he'd fallen out of love with me. He'd never truly loved me at all. He'd found a younger replacement, gotten her pregnant, and decided to upgrade his life. I sat in Michael's old office chair, the tablet still glowing in my hands, and something shifted inside me. The crying stopped. The shaking stopped. A cold, crystal-clear calm settled over my thoughts. He thought I was clueless. He thought I was easy to discard. He thought he could mock my love, steal my money, and walk away to his shiny new life without consequences. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I took screenshots of everything, every cruel message, every mocking joke, every piece of evidence of his affair. I backed them up to 3 different places. Then I put the tablet back exactly where I'd found it, under the stack of notebooks. Let him think his secrets were safe. Let him think he'd gotten away with it. My jaw clenched tight. If he only knew what was coming. The headaches started a week after New Year's, dull throbs that built behind my eyes until I could barely grade papers at my desk. Patricia insisted I see a doctor. "You've been through trauma, honey," she said, driving me to the clinic. "Your body is reacting to the stress. Let them check you out." I sat in the pastel-colored examination room, fluorescent lights humming overhead, waiting for Dr. Morrison to explain why my head felt like it was splitting open. She was a kind woman in her 50s, with gentle hands and concerned eyes. "The headaches could be stress-related," she said, checking my chart. "But given your symptoms, the nausea, the fatigue, the emotional volatility, I'd like to run one more test, just to be thorough." "What kind of test?" "When was your last period, Angela?" My mind went blank. With everything that had happened, I hadn't even thought about it. I'm not sure. Maybe 6 weeks ago? Dr. Morrison's expression shifted slightly. "Let's do an ultrasound, just to rule everything out." 20 minutes later, I was lying on an examination table with cold gel on my stomach, staring at a screen that meant nothing to me. Dr. Morrison moved the ultrasound wand slowly across my abdomen, her eyes fixed on the monitor. Her expression changed, surprise, then concern, then something close to amazement. "Angela," she said softly, "you're pregnant." The words didn't make sense at first. Pregnant. Me, with Michael's baby. After everything he'd done, after he'd left me for Jessica and her pregnancy, I was carrying his child too. But Dr. Morrison wasn't done. "Actually," she continued, adjusting the screen so I could see it better, "you're not just pregnant, you're carrying triplets." Time stopped. On the screen I could see them. 3 tiny forms, 3 flickering heartbeats, 3 perfect miracles I never expected. The sound of their heartbeats filled the room, strong and steady and real. "Triplets," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, you're about 7 weeks along, which explains why you didn't know yet. Angela, this is a high-risk pregnancy. We'll need to monitor you closely, but these babies look healthy so far." I couldn't speak, couldn't think. My hand moved to my stomach, fingers splaying across the place where 3 lives were growing. Michael's children. My children. "Does the father know?" Dr. Morrison asked gently. I shook my head slowly. "No, he doesn't know." And in that moment, lying on that examination table with ultrasound gel drying on my skin and 3 heartbeats echoing in my ears, something fierce and protective blazed to life inside me. Michael thought he was leaving me with nothing. He thought he was starting fresh with Jessica and their one baby, but I had three. 3 pieces of him that he'd never get back. 3 reasons to fight harder than I'd ever fought before. He doesn't know, I repeated, and this time my voice was steady, strong. And he's not going to know, not yet. Dr. Morrison looked at me with understanding in her eyes. She'd probably seen her share of broken marriages and complicated pregnancies. "That's your choice to make," she said. "But Angela, you'll need support. This won't be easy." "I know," I said, sitting up and pulling my shirt down, "but I'm stronger than people think." As I walked out of that clinic into the cold February air, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: power. Michael had taken so much from me: my trust, my savings, my belief in love. But he'd also given me something he didn't know about yet. And when he found out, it would be too late for him to undo any of it. That night, I sat alone in my living room with all the lights off, moonlight streaming through the windows, and processed everything I'd learned in the past week. Michael had cheated for 8 months. He'd mocked me to his mistress. He'd stolen our savings. He'd filed for divorce because Jessica was pregnant with his child. And now I was pregnant too, with 3 of his children. The universe had a twisted sense of justice. Patricia arrived just after 9, carrying Thai food and determination. "Talk to me," she said, settling onto the couch beside me. "What did the doctor say?" I texted her earlier. "Need to talk. It's big." Now, looking at my best friend's worried face, I told her everything. The affair. The messages. The mockery. Jessica's pregnancy. And then, finally, my own. "Triplets," Patricia breathed, her eyes wide. "Angela, that's incredible and terrifying, and oh my God, does Michael know?" "No," I said firmly, "and I'm not going to tell him. Not yet." Patricia studied my face. "What are you thinking?" I stood up and walked to the window, arms wrapped around myself. "Michael thinks he's leaving one pregnant woman for another. He thinks he's getting his fresh start with Jessica and their baby. He has no idea what he's actually walking away from." 3 babies, Patricia murmured. "Exactly." I turned to face her. "He needs to feel the full weight of his choices before I tell him. He needs to experience what it's like to build this new life with Jessica. He needs to feel secure in his decision. And then, when he's all settled in his delusion, I'll tell him." "That's..." Patricia paused, choosing her words carefully. "That's calculated." "He called me an easy mark," I said, my voice hard. "He laughed about how I gave up everything for him. Well, he's about to learn that I'm not as helpless as he thought." Patricia nodded slowly. "What else are you not telling me?" I smiled, the first real smile in days. "My grandmother left me money when she died 2 years ago. Michael never knew about it because I kept it in a separate account. It's $180,000. "What?" Patricia nearly dropped her wine glass. "Grandma Rose was smart. She put it in an account with only my name before Michael and I got married. She told me it was for emergencies, for my future, for security. I never touched it. I didn't need to. We were doing fine. But Michael doesn't know it exists. So when he drained your joint savings, he left me with nothing he knew about," I finished. "But I have nearly $200,000 he can't touch." Patricia's expression shifted from shock to something close to admiration. "What else?" "I've been working on my master's degree," I admitted. "Online, at night. I'm 3 credits away from finishing. Michael knew I'd started it years ago, but he thought I'd given up. I didn't. I just stopped talking about it because he made fun of my school teacher ambitions. Angela, with that degree, I can apply for vice principal positions, make $30,000 more a year. I've already been talking to the district superintendent. There's an opening at Washington Elementary next year." Patricia stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You've been planning this." "No," I corrected. "I've been surviving this. I've been building a life that didn't depend entirely on Michael, even when I didn't realize I'd need it. And now?" I placed my hand on my still flat stomach. Now I have 3 more reasons to be independent." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything settling between us. "When will you tell him?" Patricia finally asked. "Valentine's Day," I said, the date already fixed in my mind. "Let him spend a few weeks in his new life with Jessica. Let him feel like he's escaped. Then I'll call him on the most romantic day of the year and tell him what he's lost." "That's brutal," Patricia whispered. "He earned it." My friend reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm with you. Whatever you need, I'm here." "I know," I said, squeezing back. "I'm going to need help when these babies come. A village, like they say." "You've got one," Patricia promised. "We'll figure this out together." That night, after Patricia left, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started making lists. Doctor appointments, lawyer consultations, financial planning, everything I needed to do to prepare for single motherhood times 3. Michael thought he destroyed me. He thought he'd left me broken and dependent. But I was about to show him exactly how wrong he was. The revenge wouldn't be dramatic. It wouldn't be violent. It would be something far more powerful. It would be me, thriving without him, raising his children without his help, building a life he'd never get to be part of. And he wouldn't understand what he'd lost until it was far, far too late. 2 weeks crawled by like months. I played my part perfectly. The devastated wife, the woman abandoned on New Year's Eve, the victim everyone pitied. At school, colleagues whispered sympathetically when they thought I couldn't hear. At the grocery store, neighbors offered sad smiles and casseroles. I accepted it all with grace, let them see my red-rimmed eyes and tired smile. But behind closed doors, I was anything but broken. Patricia became my co-conspirator, my eyes and ears in the social circles Michael and I had shared. She attended the dinner parties I skipped, listened to the gossip I couldn't access, and reported back with military precision. Jessica Chen works in Michael's old department. Patricia told me over coffee one Saturday morning. She's 26, fresh out of grad school. Very pretty, if you like that polished Instagram filter look. I sipped my decaf, doctor's orders now, and waited for more. "She's only 8 weeks pregnant," Patricia continued, watching my face. "1 baby, due in September." 1 baby. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was already 11 weeks along with 3. "And Michael?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Patricia's expression darkened. He quit his job at Thompson & Associates, just walked out 2 weeks after filing for divorce, said he needed a fresh start and couldn't work somewhere that reminded him of his old life. I almost laughed. Michael had spent 6 years climbing that corporate ladder, and he'd thrown it away for what? A girl young enough to be his student and a fantasy of a perfect new beginning. "He drained your joint savings," Patricia added quietly. "I know you already saw the statement, but people are talking. He took $45,000 and moved into a fancy apartment downtown with Jessica. Apparently she has expensive taste." "Good," I said, and meant it. Let him burn through that money. He had no idea what was waiting for him. 3 days later, I sat across from Diane Morrison, one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. Her office was all glass and steel, with a view of the city that reminded me how small Michael's world was about to become. "You have all the leverage here, Angela," Diane said, flipping through the documents I'd brought. "The house is in your name because your grandmother provided the down payment. That protects it as separate property. He drained joint savings without consultation. That's dissipation of marital assets. And the affair?" She tapped the screenshots I'd printed from his tablet. "This establishes fault. Illinois is technically a no-fault divorce state, but evidence like this affects asset division." "What about the babies?" I asked, my hand unconsciously moving to my stomach. Diane's smile was sharp as a knife. "That's your ACE card. Child support for triplets? We're looking at $3,500 to $4,000 per month, minimum. And here's the beautiful part. He quit his job, but the court can impute income based on his earning capacity. He was making $120,000 a year at Thompson & Associates. The judge won't let him claim poverty just because he made a stupid career decision. Time is your weapon, Diane continued, leaning forward. The longer you wait to reveal the pregnancy, the more he commits to his new life. Then, when everything crumbles, and it will crumble, he'll have no one to blame but himself. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, powerful. That evening, I filed my counter-divorce petition. But I didn't just respond to Michael's terms. I rewrote them completely. The house would be mine. The furniture would be mine. Half of everything else would be mine, plus reimbursement for the savings he'd stolen. And I still hadn't mentioned the babies. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was teaching fifth graders about the Revolutionary War. My phone buzzed against my desk, Michael's number flashing on the screen. I sent it to voicemail and continued my lesson about brave people fighting for what they deserved. During my lunch break, I listened to his message. Angela, what the hell is this? His voice was tight with anger. You can't claim the entire house. We bought that together. Call me back. We need to talk. I deleted the voicemail and ate my sandwich in peace. He called 6 more times that day. I ignored everyone. When I finally answered on Wednesday evening, my voice was calm, controlled. Nothing like the crying, broken woman he'd left behind. Michael. Finally, he snapped. Did you get my messages? I did. Then what's this about the house? You can't just take everything, Angela. That's not how divorce works. I settled into my armchair, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. Actually, that's exactly how it works when your grandmother provides the down payment and the house is titled in your name alone. My lawyer explained it very clearly. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear his mind racing. That's not fair, he finally said. I've been paying the mortgage for 6 years. And I've been paying for groceries, utilities, home repairs, and everything else while you saved your money for… What was it you told Jessica? Your fresh start? Another silence. Longer this time. How did you… He started, then stopped. Are you spying on me? I don't need to spy on you, Michael. You left your old tablet here, the one that's still logged into all your accounts. The one with 8 months of messages to Jessica where you called me an easy mark and laughed about how I gave up everything for you. I heard him suck in a breath. Angela, I can explain. You wanted different paths, I interrupted, my voice steel wrapped in silk. This is mine. I suggest you focus on yours. We can work this out, he said, switching tactics. We can negotiate. You don't have to make this difficult. Difficult? I laughed, and it wasn't a kind sound. You filed for divorce on New Year's Eve. You stole $45,000 from our joint account. You cheated on me for 8 months, and you think I'm the one making this difficult. I didn't steal anything. That was our money. It was our money, I agreed, and you took it without discussion or agreement. My lawyer has a word for that. Dissipation of marital assets. The judge won't like it. Your lawyer? His voice climbed higher. Jesus, Angela, when did you become so vindictive? Vindictive? The word sat bitter on my tongue. No, Michael, I'm being smart. There's a difference. You taught me that, remember? When you mocked me to your mistress? When you called me clueless? He made a strangled sound. Here's what's going to happen. I continued, my voice never rising above conversational. You're going to sign the papers my lawyer sends. You're going to agree to my terms. And you're going to move on with your new life with Jessica, just like you planned. Because if you fight me on this, I'll make sure everyone, your family, your friends, your future employers, knows exactly what kind of man you are. You wouldn't try me. The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing, could picture him pacing whatever expensive apartment he'd rented with my money. Fine, he finally spat. Take the damn house, but don't expect anything else from me. I don't expect anything from you, Michael, I said softly. I learned that lesson already. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from power, from the intoxicating feeling of standing up for myself, of watching him realize that I wasn't the helpless woman he'd left behind. Patricia called 30 seconds later. How did it go? He agreed to my terms. Angela, she squealed into the phone, I'm so proud of you. It's just the first step, I said, but I was smiling. There's more to come. Good, Patricia said fiercely. He deserves every bit of what's coming. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Information traveled fast in our social circle, and Patricia was an excellent detective. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned that Michael's fresh start wasn't going as planned. Jessica, it turned out, had expectations that far exceeded Michael's diminishing bank account. She wanted designer maternity clothes, a bigger apartment with a nursery, a new car because her old one wasn't safe for a baby. Wedding planning, yes, apparently she expected a ring and a ceremony before the baby arrived. He's hemorrhaging money, Patricia reported over lunch. David saw them at that expensive bistro downtown last week. Michael looked stressed, and Jessica was showing him pictures on her phone, probably furniture or baby gear. Very expensive baby gear, knowing her type. I forked up my salad, extra protein, doctor's orders, and listened. And here's the best part, Patricia continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. Michael hasn't found a new job yet. He's been applying, but walking out on Thompson & Associates without notice. That burned bridges. Nobody wants to hire someone who might quit on a whim. So he's living off the $45,000 he took, I said, which won't last long, not with Jessica's shopping habits. Patricia grinned. He traded stability for chaos. It's poetic justice. It really was. At home, my father was recovering beautifully. His color had returned, and he'd started taking short walks around the neighborhood. When I told him about the house, about standing up to Michael, he squeezed my hand with tears in his eyes. That's my girl, he said. You're not just surviving, Ange. You're winning. I learned from the best, I told him. You taught me that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. My pregnancy was starting to show, just barely, but enough that I'd switched to looser clothes. Patricia helped me pick out outfits that hid my growing belly. Not yet, I kept thinking. He doesn't get to know yet. But the universe had other plans. At my 16-week checkup, Dr. Morrison confirmed that all 3 babies were developing perfectly. They're strong, she said, smiling at the ultrasound screen. You're doing everything right, Angela. When will I start really showing, I asked. With triplets? Probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Multiple pregnancies show earlier and more dramatically. I did the math in my head. That would be mid-February, right on schedule for my plan. Meanwhile, Michael's problems were multiplying. Through the grapevine, I heard that Jessica was pushing hard for marriage. Not just engagement, but actual wedding plans. She'd booked a venue without asking him. She'd started planning a honeymoon they couldn't afford. She'd told her parents they were getting married in April. And now Michael was trapped between disappointing his pregnant girlfriend and bankrupting himself on a wedding. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He made his bed, I told Patricia one evening, both of us curled up on my couch with hot chocolate. Now he gets to lie in it. What about you? Patricia asked gently. How are you feeling? Really? I placed my hand on my stomach, where 3 tiny lives were growing stronger every day. I'm scared, I admitted. Triplets, single parenting, the financial pressure. But I'm also excited. These babies, they're mine, they're my future. Michael doesn't get to be part of this beautiful thing because he chose to walk away. He's going to regret it, Patricia said. I know. I smiled. That's the best part. 6 weeks after Michael filed for divorce, I completed my final 3 credits for my master's degree in educational leadership. The notification came through my email at 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday night. Congratulations! You have successfully completed all requirements for your degree. I stared at the screen, tears streaming down my face, but these were happy tears, triumphant tears. I'd done it. While Michael was busy mocking me, busy planning his exit, busy building his affair, I'd been building myself. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Harrison, the district superintendent. We'd talked casually before about my career goals, but now I had the credentials to back up my ambitions. "Angela," Dr. Harrison said warmly, gesturing to a chair in her spacious office. "Congratulations on completing your master's. I saw the notification from the university." "Thank you. I'm excited to explore new opportunities." "Well, timing is everything." She pulled out a file. "The vice principal position at Washington Elementary is opening up in August. Janet is retiring. The job is yours if you want it." My heart leaped. "Seriously?" "You're qualified, respected, and you already work in the building. The transition would be seamless. Plus," she smiled knowingly, "I heard about your divorce. This comes with a $32,000 raise. Might help with the new chapter you're starting." $32,000. That was more than enough to offset any child support I might not receive. That was independence, security, proof that I didn't need Michael's money or Michael's approval. "I accept," I said, shaking her hand firmly. "Excellent. We'll make the announcement next week." News traveled fast, faster than I expected. By Monday afternoon, half the school knew about my promotion. By Tuesday, mutual friends were calling to congratulate me. And by Wednesday, Michael had heard. He called that evening. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message while cooking dinner. "Angela, I heard about the job. That's great. Really, I'm happy for you." He paused, and I could hear something in his voice. Surprise? Respect? Fear? "I didn't know you'd finished your degree. That's impressive. Anyway, I was wondering if we could talk. Maybe grab coffee. There are some things I'd like to say." I deleted the message without responding. He tried again the next day, and the next. Always the same tone. Conciliatory, almost admiring, definitely unsettled. He was realizing something important. I wasn't the dependent wife he'd left behind. I didn't need him. I'd never really needed him. Patricia noticed the shift. "He's calling you?" "Every day," I confirmed. "I don't answer." "Good. Let him stew in it. Let him realize what he gave up." My father, now strong enough to cook breakfast again, raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To my brilliant daughter, vice principal at 32 years old, and she did it all on her own." "Not all on my own," I said, hugging him. "I had you, and Patricia, and these little ones." I patted my stomach, which was definitely rounder now. "Speaking of which," Dad said carefully, "are you going to tell Michael soon?" "Soon," I promised, but on my timeline, not his. The truth was, I was waiting for the perfect moment, the moment when Michael felt most secure in his new life, most convinced he'd made the right choice. That's when I'd pull the rug out from under him. Patience, my grandmother used to say, is how the wise win wars. Mid-February arrived with unseasonable warmth and my carefully orchestrated plan. Sarah Chen, Jessica's older sister and a former friend of mine, was hosting a casual dinner party. She'd invited me out of courtesy, probably expecting me to decline. Instead, I accepted. "Are you sure about this?" Patricia asked, helping me pick out an outfit. "You're going to see him there." "That's the point," I said, slipping into a fitted wrap dress that, at 17 weeks pregnant with triplets, very clearly showed my condition. I looked radiant. Pregnancy agreed with me, triplets notwithstanding. My skin glowed, my hair shone. I looked healthy and happy and very, very pregnant. "You're diabolical," Patricia said admiringly. "I learned from the best manipulator I know," I replied. "Michael." The party was at Sarah's upscale townhouse, all exposed brick and pendant lighting. I arrived fashionably late, Patricia at my side like a bodyguard. The moment I walked through the door, conversation stuttered and stopped. Michael stood across the room with Jessica, his arm around her slightly swollen belly. He'd lost weight. His face looked thinner, stressed. Jessica looked polished as always, but there was tension in her perfectly made-up face. And then Michael saw me. I watched his eyes travel from my face down to my stomach, obviously, unmistakably pregnant. The color drained from his face. Jessica noticed his reaction and followed his gaze, her eyes widening. I smiled serenely and headed for the drink table, where I poured myself sparkling water with lime. Patricia stayed close, running interference as other guests approached to greet me. "Angela, "You look amazing," Sarah said, appearing at my elbow. Her eyes flickered to my stomach. "I didn't know you were seeing anyone new." "I'm not," I said simply, taking a sip of my water. Confusion crossed her face, then understanding, then shock. Oh. Across the room, I could see Michael trying to make his way toward me, but his friends kept stopping him. They'd noticed, too, and questions were flying. Jessica clung to his arm, her face tight with suspicion or fear or both. I didn't approach him, didn't acknowledge him. I chatted with old friends, laughed at jokes, and generally acted like I was having the time of my life, which, honestly, I was. "Angela." Michael's voice came from behind me, strained and uncertain. I turned slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "Michael, Jessica, how nice to see you both." Jessica's eyes were locked on my stomach. "You're pregnant." "I am," I confirmed pleasantly. "Is it—" Michael started, his voice cracking. "Is it mine?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment, let him sweat. Everyone nearby had gone quiet, pretending not to listen while listening to every word. "I think that's a conversation for another time," I said calmly. "Enjoy your evening." I walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth open. Patricia and I left 20 minutes later. As we drove home, my phone started buzzing. "Michael!" Of course. I turned it off. "That was masterful," Patricia said, grinning. "Did you see his face?" "I did," I said, satisfaction warm in my chest. "Now we wait." That night, Michael called 17 times. He left 12 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. "Angela, please, we need to talk." "Is the baby mine? Angela, answer me." "I deserve to know. Call me back." "Angela, I'm begging you. Just tell me if it's mine." I listened to each voicemail once, then deleted them. Let him panic. Let him wonder. Let him feel a fraction of the uncertainty and fear he'd caused me. Tomorrow was Valentine's Day. Tomorrow I would give him his answer, and it would destroy him. My phone rang at 7:15 a.m. on Valentine's Day. I'd been awake for an hour, drinking tea and watching the sunrise through my kitchen window. 3 heartbeats fluttered under my palm, strong and steady, and mine. I'd known he would call early. Desperation makes people predictable. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Angela." His voice was ragged, like he hadn't slept. "Thank you for answering." "Please don't hang up." "Good morning, Michael," I said, my tone professionally cordial, the voice I used with difficult parents at school. "The baby," he rushed forward. "At Sarah's party. Everyone's been asking me questions, and I don't know what to tell them. Is it mine?" I took a slow sip of tea, letting the silence stretch. "Angela, please. I need to know." "Yes," I said simply. "It's yours." I heard him exhale. Relief and panic mixed together. Okay. We need to talk about this. We need to figure out custody and—" "There's something else you should know," I interrupted quietly. "What?" "I'm not having a baby, Michael." I paused, measuring my words like poison. "I'm having your babies. Triplets." The silence on the other end was absolute. "What?" he finally whispered. "Triplets," I repeated clearly. 3 babies due in July, all perfectly healthy, all yours. "That's not— How is that?" He couldn't form a complete sentence. "We conceived in November," I explained calmly, like I was teaching a particularly slow student. "Around Thanksgiving, if you remember, before you started planning your exit, before you filed for divorce. These are your children, Michael, all 3 of them." "Oh my God." His voice broke. "Angela, I didn't know. You have to believe me, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," I said, and now steel crept into my tone. "You filed for divorce before I even found out I was pregnant. You walked away without a backward glance. You were too busy building your new life with Jessica and her 1 baby to consider that you might be leaving behind 3. "I made a mistake," he said desperately. "Angela, I made a terrible mistake. We can fix this. We can work this out. You filed for divorce." I cut him off. "You made your choice. These are my children now, not ours. Mine. You can't do that. I have rights. You have responsibilities. I corrected coldly. My lawyer will be in touch about child support. I believe the court-calculated amount for 3 children based on your previous salary is around $3,500 per month. But that's between you and the court. $3,000. Angela, I don't have that kind of money. I don't even have a job right now. That sounds like a personal problem. Please, he begged, and I could hear tears in his voice. Can we meet? Can we talk about this in person? I need to see you. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, I said, my voice firm. You chose your path, Michael. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to mock me. You chose to file for divorce. You chose to walk away from 3 children you didn't even know existed. Those were your choices. Now live with them. I love you, he said desperately. I still love you. I made a mistake with Jessica. I was confused and scared and— Stop, I commanded. Don't you dare say you love me. You don't even know what love means. Love doesn't cheat. Love doesn't mock. Love doesn't abandon. What you feel now isn't love. It's regret. Angela, goodbye, Michael. Happy Valentine's Day. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. My hands were shaking, not with weakness, but with adrenaline, with power, with the intoxicating feeling of justice finally being served. Patricia arrived 15 minutes later with heart-shaped pancakes and a fierce hug. My father came down from the guest room with flowers, simple daisies, my favorite. How do you feel? Dad asked. Strong, I said, and meant it. I feel strong. The triplets kicked then, tiny flutters that reminded me why this all mattered, why standing up for myself, for them, was worth every difficult moment. Michael had walked away from this. He'd chosen Jessica and her false pregnancy over the real family he was building with me. And now he would spend the rest of his life regretting it. But I wouldn't spend mine giving him space in my thoughts. I had 3 babies to prepare for, a new job to excel in, a life to build, stronger, better, and completely mine. 1 week after Valentine's Day, Diane Morrison called with news. Michael's lawyer just contacted me, she said, and I could hear satisfaction in her voice. He wants to negotiate custody and visitation. Of course he does. I was grading papers at my kitchen table, red pen in hand. Here's where it gets interesting. I responded with our child support calculations based on Illinois guidelines. For 3 children with his previous salary of $120,000, we're looking at $3,500 per month minimum, and that's before we add in healthcare costs, which will be substantial with triplets. How did his lawyer respond? Radio silence for about 3 hours. Then he called back, claiming Michael has no income since he quit his job. I explained that the court will impute income based on earning capacity. He can't just quit to avoid support. I smiled. I love the law sometimes. It gets better, Diane continued. We're also claiming reimbursement for the $45,000 he drained from your joint account. I sent over the screenshots showing his affair and the text where he told Jessica he took Angela's money to set up their love nest. His lawyer is furious, calling it an invasion of privacy. He left the tablet in our house. I'm not a hacker. I just didn't delete his messages for him. Exactly my argument. And here's the cherry on top. We're requesting he cover half of all pregnancy-related medical expenses. With triplets, that's significant. We're talking specialist visits, potential NICU time, high-risk pregnancy monitoring, easily $50,000 to $80,000 if insurance doesn't cover everything. I leaned back in my chair, letting it all sink in. So he's looking at $3,500 monthly support, reimbursement of $45,000, plus half of medical expenses? Minimum. And if he fights for custody, which he seems to want, we'll request supervised visitation initially since he abandoned you during pregnancy. That means he pays for supervision services, another expense. How fast can we move this through court? Mediation is scheduled for late March. If he doesn't settle, we go to trial in May. But Angela? Diane's voice turned serious. I think he'll settle. The evidence is too damning and he doesn't have the money for a prolonged fight. 3 days later, Patricia delivered the news I'd been waiting for. Jessica found out, she said, sliding into the booth across from me at our favorite coffee shop, about the triplets. How? Michael told her. Had to. She was planning their wedding and wondering why he was suddenly stressed about money. When he explained about the child support calculations, she lost it. Patricia grinned. Megan witnessed the fight at the Harbor restaurant. Said Jessica was screaming about him lying to her, about how he'd promised she was his only family now, about how she couldn't compete with 3 babies. Compete? I raised an eyebrow. They're children, not competition. Well, Jessica sees it differently. She left the restaurant crying, hasn't been back to Michael's apartment since. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. This wasn't about Jessica. She was just another person Michael had deceived. She'd learned soon enough what kind of man he was. How's he taking it? I asked. Patricia's expression softened. Not well. David saw him at a bar last night. He looked terrible. Unshaved, drunk, rambling about ruining his life. David said Michael kept saying, "I didn't know about the triplets." How was I supposed to know? He wasn't supposed to know, I said quietly. That's the point. He walked away without knowing what he was leaving behind. That's the consequence of abandoning someone without looking back. The universe has a sense of irony, Patricia agreed. That evening, Michael's mother called me. I almost didn't answer. I'd been avoiding their family, but something made me pick up. "Angela, sweetheart," Linda said, her voice thick with emotion. "I just heard about the babies, all 3 of them. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault, Linda." "I know, but he's my son, and I'm mortified by his behavior. What he did to you, the cheating, the divorce, taking your money, it's inexcusable. His father and I are ashamed." Tears prickled my eyes. Linda had always been kind to me. "I want you to know," she continued, "that those babies are my grandchildren, and I will be in their lives if you'll let me. Not through Michael, through you. You've always been like a daughter to us, and that hasn't changed." "Thank you," I whispered. "And Angela? For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly strong. My son is a fool." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room and let myself feel it all. The sadness, the triumph, the strange relief of knowing that some relationships survived even when the marriage died. Michael had lost everything: Jessica, his job, his savings, his self-respect, and, most importantly, his family. Not because I'd destroyed him, but because his own choices had consequences he never saw coming. Justice, I was learning, wasn't always loud and dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, mathematical, inevitable. By the first week of March, Michael's life had completely unraveled. Jessica's pregnancy had been a false alarm, or possibly a lie from the beginning. Patricia's sources suggested Jessica had never been pregnant at all, just used the idea to push Michael into leaving his marriage. Once she realized he came with financial baggage, 3 babies, and no job prospects, she disappeared faster than morning fog. Michael moved back in with his parents, tail between his legs, living in his childhood bedroom at 35 years old. He tried to reach out to me, constantly. Emails that I forwarded to Diane without reading, text messages that I blocked, letters delivered to my house that I returned unopened. He even showed up at Washington Elementary once, but security escorted him off the property when I explained he wasn't welcome. "He seems desperate to talk to you," Patricia observed one Saturday while helping me paint the nursery. 3 cribs, 3 dressers, 3 of everything lined up like soldiers ready for battle. "He wants forgiveness," I said, carefully edging the trim in a soft yellow. "Or maybe he wants me to tell him it's okay, that his choices weren't that bad, but I'm not going to do that. His guilt is his to carry." "You're not even a little curious what he wants to say?" I paused, brush in hand, and considered. "No, because nothing he says will change what he did. Words are easy. Actions are truth. and his actions told me everything I needed to know. My father, now fully recovered and back in his own home, visited regularly. He'd taken to building custom toys for his future grandchildren, a rocking horse, wooden blocks, a cradle that had been in our family for generations. "How are you handling all this?" he asked one afternoon while we assembled baby furniture. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "Some days are hard. I get scared about the logistics. 3 babies, single parenting, money even with my raise. But then I remember what Grandma Rose used to say. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." "She would be so proud of you," Dad said, his eyes misty. "I hope so." Through mutual friends, I heard the gossip that I no longer needed Patricia to relay. The community had turned against Michael completely. His affair was common knowledge. Someone had leaked the story, probably someone he'd confided in who then felt betrayed when they learned the full extent of his deception. Former colleagues wouldn't return his calls about job opportunities. Friends declined invitations to hang out. His parents were civil but disappointed. Linda had apparently given him a scathing lecture about responsibility and character that left him in tears. Even Thompson and Associates, his former employer, had blacklisted him in the industry. Walking out without notice, especially for such publicly messy personal reasons, had branded him as unreliable. "He's toxic now," Patricia explained. "In this town, everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows what he did to you." Linda called me weekly now, checking on my health and the babies. She'd insisted on contributing to the nursery furniture and had already bought enough baby clothes to outfit an army of infants. "You don't have to do this," I told her during one visit. "I know I don't have to," she said firmly. "I want to. These babies are innocent in all of this, and so are you. My son made choices that have consequences, but that doesn't mean his children should suffer or that you should be alone." "What about Michael?" I asked carefully. "Does he know you're helping me?" Linda's expression hardened. "He knows. He doesn't like it. But frankly, Angela, I don't care what he likes anymore. He had the perfect wife, the perfect life, and he threw it away for nothing. He needs to learn that his actions have consequences." The divorce was proceeding quickly now that Michael had no leverage and no money to fight. Diane expected it to be finalized by mid-April. "He's going to sign everything," she told me over the phone. "The house is yours. You keep your inheritance untouched. He pays child support based on his earning capacity. He gets supervised visitation that he'll have to initiate and pay for himself. Angela, this is a complete victory." "It doesn't feel like victory," I said quietly. "It just feels like survival." Sometimes those are the same thing. The mediation was scheduled for March 28th at the county courthouse. I hadn't seen Michael in person since Sarah's party in February, almost 6 weeks ago. In that time, I'd grown substantially. At 22 weeks pregnant with triplets, I looked ready to deliver any day, though I still had 3 months to go. Patricia drove me to the courthouse, her hand squeezing mine in the parking lot. "You've got this. Remember, you're in control. He has no power here." Diane met me at the entrance, professional in her navy suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." The mediation room was sterile and beige, with a long conference table and harsh fluorescent lighting. Michael was already there with his lawyer, Mr. Stevens, a tired-looking man who clearly knew his client was on the losing side. I almost didn't recognize Michael. He'd aged 10 years in 3 months. His hair, usually perfectly styled, was disheveled and graying at the temples. He'd lost more weight. His suit hung loose on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and when he looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen before: complete defeat. His eyes dropped immediately to my belly, and I watched his face crumble. The reality of 3 babies, his babies, was impossible to ignore now. "Angela," he whispered, half standing. "Mr. Pearson, please sit down," the mediator, Mrs. Chen, instructed firmly. "Let's begin." The first hour was procedural, reviewing documents, clarifying terms, establishing facts. Michael signed off on everything: the house, the asset division, the reimbursement of the $45,000. He had no choice. The evidence of his affair and financial misconduct made fighting pointless. Then we reached child support. Based on Mr. Pearson's earning capacity of $120,000 annually, Diane stated, child support for 3 children is calculated at $3,600 per month, plus half of all medical expenses and childcare costs. My client is currently unemployed. Mr. Stevens interjected weakly. Your client voluntarily quit his job, Diane countered. The court will impute income based on his qualifications and previous salary. He doesn't get to claim poverty because he made a poor career decision. Michael sat silently, staring at the table. Additionally, Diane continued, my client requests that all visitation be supervised initially, given that Mr. Pearson abandoned her during pregnancy and has demonstrated instability. That's not necessary, Mr. Stevens protested. My client wants to be involved. Then he can pay for supervision services and prove his commitment, Diane said smoothly. The mediator took notes, her expression neutral. Will include supervised visitation pending completion of a parenting class and psychological evaluation. Mr. Pearson will bear the cost of supervision until the court reviews his fitness. Michael flinched like he'd been slapped. Is there anything else to discuss? Mrs. Chen asked. Yes, Michael said suddenly, his voice rough. I'd like to speak to Angela. Alone. That's not... Diane started. It's okay, I said quietly. Give us 5 minutes. Everyone filed out, though Diane looked reluctant. When the door closed, Michael and I were alone for the first time since New Year's Eve. He stood, took a step toward me, then stopped, like he'd remembered he didn't have the right to approach me anymore. Angela, His voice broke. I don't know where to start. Then don't, I said calmly. Please. I need you to understand. I was scared. I was terrified of commitment, of being a father, of all of it. Jessica was young and exciting, and she made me feel like I was someone different, someone who didn't have responsibilities or... You didn't make a mistake, I interrupted, my voice steady and clear. You made choices. You chose to cheat on me for 8 months. You chose to mock me to your mistress. You chose to drain our bank account. You chose to file for divorce on New Year's Eve. You chose to walk away from 3 children you didn't even know existed. I didn't know. That's the point, I said, my voice rising slightly. You left without knowing. You abandoned me without looking back to see what you were leaving behind. That's who you are, Michael. Someone who doesn't consider consequences until they're staring you in the face. He sank back into his chair, tears streaming down his face. I love you. I still love you. Can't we? No, I said firmly. What we had is dead. You killed it. And love? I shook my head. You don't get to use that word. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't betray or mock or abandon. What you feel now isn't love. It's regret. It's grief for what you lost. But you don't get to put that burden on me. What about the babies? He asked desperately. I want to be their father. I want to be part of their lives. You'll be what the court says you can be, I said. You'll pay your support. You'll attend your supervised visits. You'll take your parenting classes. And maybe one day you'll earn the right to be called their father. But that's up to you to prove, not me to give. I stood, placing my hands on my enormous belly. The babies were active today, kicking and rolling, reminding me what this was all for. I gave you everything, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. My career advancement, my friendships, my savings, my trust, my love. And you gave me divorce papers and abandonment in return. But you also gave me a gift, even if you didn't mean to. What gift? He whispered. You showed me who you really are. You showed me what I'm capable of surviving, and you gave me 3 perfect reasons to never doubt my own strength again. I moved toward the door. These babies saved my life, Michael. Not you, them. And I will spend every day making sure they know they're wanted, loved, and valued. Everything you made me doubt about myself. Angela, please. Goodbye, Michael. I opened the door and walked out, leaving him crying in that sterile room. Diane and Patricia were waiting in the hall, and when they saw my face, calm, resolved, unshakable, they knew it was over. Not just the marriage, not just the mediation. The whole chapter of my life that had Michael in it was finally, completely over. And the next chapter? That was mine to write. The divorce was finalized on April 15th, tax day, which felt appropriately symbolic. I sat in Judge Martinez's courtroom wearing a navy maternity dress that Patricia had helped me pick out. My belly so large now that strangers asked if I was having twins. Triplets, I'd answer, and watch their eyes widen with a mixture of awe and sympathy. But I didn't need sympathy anymore. Judge Martinez reviewed the settlement agreement with methodical precision. Mrs. Pearson retains sole ownership of the marital home at 342 Riverside Drive, as the down payment was provided by her grandmother and the property is titled solely in her name. Mr. Pearson, do you understand and agree? Yes, Your Honor, Michael said quietly from the other side of the courtroom. He didn't look at me. Mrs. Pearson retains her separate inheritance account totaling $180,000, which remains untouched as separate property. The remaining joint assets are divided equally. Mr. Pearson will reimburse Mrs. Pearson $45,000 for funds withdrawn without consent from the joint savings account. This can be paid in installments over 3 years. Do both parties agree? Yes, Your Honor, we said in unison. The judge continued through the child support calculations. When she reached the amount, $3,600 per month plus half of medical expenses and childcare costs, I heard Michael's sharp intake of breath. Mr. Pearson, Judge Martinez said, looking at him over her reading glasses. The court recognizes you are currently unemployed. However, given your education, experience, and previous salary of $120,000 annually, the court imputes income at that level. You are capable of earning this amount, and your voluntary resignation does not absolve you of responsibility to your children. Child support payments begin upon the birth of the children. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Visitation will be supervised until you complete a court-ordered parenting class and psychological evaluation. The cost of supervision is your responsibility. Mrs. Pearson has sole legal and physical custody. Do you wish to contest this arrangement? There was a long pause. Michael's lawyer leaned over to whisper something to him. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice barely audible. No, Your Honor, I'm not ready. I need time. Something in my chest loosened. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath, waiting to hear if he would fight for access to our children. His admission, "I'm not ready," was perhaps the first honest thing he'd said in months. Judge Martinez nodded. Very well. The court grants the dissolution of marriage. You are both free to go. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. It was over. Diane walked me out, her hand on my elbow. You did it, she said with genuine warmth. Complete victory. The house, your inheritance, fair asset division, strong child support, supervised visitation. Angela, you protected yourself and your babies perfectly. Thank you, I said, and meant it. For everything. In the parking lot, Patricia was waiting with balloons, pink, blue, and yellow, tied to her car's antenna. Free woman, she announced, hugging me carefully around my massive belly. How do you feel? Light, I said, surprised to find it was true. I feel light. 2 weeks later, my father officially moved back to his own home. He was fully recovered now, strong and healthy, ready to reclaim his independence. But he'd already promised to be heavily involved once the babies came. I'm going to spoil those grandchildren rotten, he said, loading the last box into his car. I'm counting on it, I told him. That Saturday, Patricia threw me a baby shower at her house. It was small, just my closest friends, some colleagues from school, Linda and Michael's Aunt Carol, and a few neighbors who'd supported me through everything. The living room was decorated in soft pastels, and 3 identical teddy bears sat in tiny chairs as centerpieces. "Speech!" someone called out as I opened the last gift, a triple stroller that must have cost a fortune. I stood, one hand supporting my aching back, and looked around at all these faces, people who'd shown up for me when I needed them most. "I'm not good at speeches," I started, "but I want you all to know how much your support has meant. 3 months ago, I thought my life was over. I thought being abandoned while pregnant meant I'd failed somehow. But you all showed me something different. You showed me that family isn't always blood. It's the people who choose to stand beside you when things get hard. Thank you for being my family." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later, after everyone had left and Patricia and I were cleaning up, she squeezed my hand. "You're going to be an amazing mother." "We'll see," I said, but I was smiling. "Ask me again when I'm running on 2 hours of sleep with 3 crying babies." "Even then," Patricia said firmly. "Especially then." 3 months later, on July 14th at 2:47 a.m., my water broke. I was 34 weeks pregnant, early but expected with triplets. Patricia drove me to the hospital while my father followed behind, both of them running red lights and probably breaking every traffic law in the city. The delivery was complicated but manageable. Dr. Morrison and a team of specialists worked efficiently while I focused on breathing through contractions that felt like my body was being torn in half. "You're doing great, Angela," Dr. Morrison encouraged. "First baby is crowning." At 6:23 a.m., my daughter was born. 5 pounds, 2 ounces. Perfect. At 6:41 a.m., my first son arrived. 4 pounds, 11 ounces. Tiny but fierce. At 6:58 a.m., my second son completed our family. 5 pounds even. Beautiful. They whisked the babies away immediately, standard procedure for preemies, but I heard them crying. 3 different pitches, 3 different personalities already emerging. My heart, which I'd thought Michael had destroyed beyond repair, suddenly felt 3 times too large for my chest. 2 hours later, I was settled in a recovery room with all 3 babies in isolettes beside my bed. They were healthy, breathing well, no NICU needed, just observation. My father stood at the window with tears streaming down his face. Patricia sat beside me, holding my hand. "What are you going to name them?" Patricia asked softly. I looked at each tiny face, memorizing their features. The oldest, my daughter, had dark hair and Michael's nose. The middle child had my eyes. The youngest had a stubborn set to his jaw that reminded me of my father. "Hope," I said, touching my daughter's isolette, "because she represents everything I hoped for when I thought I had nothing." "Valor," I continued, moving to my middle son, "because he'll know the value of courage and strength." "And Phoenix," I finished, looking at my youngest, "because we all rose from the ashes of what was destroyed." "Hope, valor, and Phoenix," Patricia repeated. "Perfect." A nurse knocked softly and entered with a massive bouquet of white roses. "These just arrived for you, Mrs. Pearson." The card read, "Congratulations on the babies. I'm glad they're healthy. Michael." I stared at the card for a long moment. Part of me wanted to throw the flowers away to reject any gesture from him, but a wiser part, the part that had spent months learning about grace and dignity, chose differently. "Do you have a note card?" I asked the nurse. She provided one, and I wrote carefully, "Thank you for the flowers. Hope, Valor, and Phoenix are doing well. When you're ready to meet them properly, let me know." "Angela, mail this to Michael Pearson," I told Patricia, giving her his parents' address. "You're being very generous," Patricia observed. "I'm being at peace," I corrected. "There's a difference." That night, after visiting hours ended and I was alone with my sleeping babies, I sat in the semi-darkness and watched their tiny chests rise and fall. 3 miracles, 3 reasons to keep fighting, 3 perfect pieces of love that were entirely mine. "We did it," I whispered to them. "Your mama did it, and we're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to be extraordinary." Hope made a small sound in her sleep. Valor's fist curled tighter. Phoenix's breathing deepened. My family, complete, whole. And nothing, not Michael, not the divorce, not the betrayal, could take this away from me. Winter came early that year, but inside our house on Riverside Drive, everything was warm. I stood at the kitchen counter preparing bottles for the 3 a.m. feeding, a routine I could now do half asleep, and listen to the sounds of my home. Hope cooing from her bassinet, Valor's gentle snoring, Phoenix fussing slightly before settling back down. These were the sounds of life, of family, of everything I'd built from nothing. The vice principal position was everything I'd hoped for and more. Washington Elementary had been incredibly supportive, giving me 12 weeks of maternity leave and flexible hours when I returned. My assistant, Marcus, had stepped up beautifully to help with duties when I needed to leave for pediatrician appointments or daycare emergencies. Because yes, there were emergencies. 3 babies meant 3 times the chaos, 3 times the doctor visits, 3 times the sleepless nights, but it also meant 3 times the love, 3 times the laughter, 3 times the joy. My father had become a fixture at my house, arriving each morning to help with the babies before I left for work. He'd rock them to sleep, change diapers without complaint, and sing old lullabies I'd forgotten he knew. "Best job I've ever had," he'd say, cradling Phoenix while Hope grabbed his finger. Patricia was the official aunt, complete with a key to my house and an open invitation to Sunday dinners. She'd shown up for every pediatrician appointment, every milestone, every moment I'd needed an extra pair of hands or a supportive word. Michael paid his child support on time, every month, like clockwork. $3,600 transferred automatically on the 1st. He'd found a job finally, something in middle management that paid less than his old position but covered his obligations. He'd completed his parenting class and psychological evaluation. He had the right to visit, but he rarely came. Once, maybe twice a month, he'd schedule supervised visitation at the Family Services Center. He'd hold the babies awkwardly, tears in his eyes, and tell them he was sorry. The supervisor reported that he was gentle and attentive during his 2-hour visits, but that he always left looking devastated. "He's ashamed," Linda explained during one of her weekly visits. She'd become a constant presence in our lives, a grandmother who showed up consistently and loved fiercely. "He knows what he gave up, and he can't forgive himself." "That's his burden to carry," I said, not unkindly. "Not mine." I didn't hate Michael anymore. I didn't think about him much at all, honestly. My life was too full of important things. Hope's first smile, Valor's determination to roll over before his siblings, Phoenix's infectious giggle. There wasn't room for bitterness alongside all that love. On a cold January evening, exactly 1 year after Michael had handed me those divorce papers, I sat in my living room with all 3 babies finally asleep in their swings. The house was quiet except for the gentle whir of the swings and the occasional sigh from one of my children. I thought about that night, how broken I'd felt, how certain I was that my life was over. I thought about the woman I'd been then, dependent, unsure, willing to shrink herself to fit someone else's idea of who she should be. I wasn't that woman anymore. The revenge everyone expected, the dramatic confrontation, the destruction of Michael's life, the vindictive victory, had never come. Because it wasn't revenge I'd needed. It was justice. It was consequence. It was truth. Michael didn't lose me on New Year's Eve. He'd already lost himself long before that, somewhere in the lies and betrayals and choices that prioritized his comfort over our commitment. I just refused to lose myself too. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But this wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was building a life from ruins. It was discovering that your value isn't determined by who stays, but by who you become when you stand alone. And I'd become someone I was proud of, a mother, a vice principal, a woman who knew her worth and refused to accept less than she deserved. I looked at my 3 sleeping babies, Hope with her dark curls, Valor with his serious expression even in sleep, Phoenix with his peaceful smile, and felt my heart overflow with gratitude. These 3 miracles saved my life, not Michael, not revenge, not bitterness, just these 3 perfect souls who needed me to be strong, to be whole, to be enough. And I was. I was enough. I'd always been enough. To everyone reading this story, wondering if they can survive their own betrayal, their own heartbreak, their own moment when everything falls apart, you can. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when they walk away, let them go. Your value isn't determined by who stays. It's determined by who you become when you stand alone. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, is building a life so full of love and purpose that the person who left becomes irrelevant to your happiness, is showing your children, through your example, that strength isn't about never falling. It's about always getting back up. These 3 miracles saved my life, and every single day I get to save theirs right back. So tell me, what city are you from? If you believe that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, drop a like below. Share this story if you know someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they think, because you never know who needs that reminder today. And if you're going through your own New Year's Eve moment right now, remember, by Valentine's Day, everything can change. By summer, you can be reborn. By next year, you can be free. Subscribe so you don't miss more stories about survival, strength, and the kind of justice that comes not from revenge, but from refusing to let someone else's choices define your worth. You're stronger than you know, and you deserve better than someone who doesn't see your value. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing, along with me, that we all have the power to rise from the ashes.